Hello and welcome back to the Unhand Free Throw. My name is Simon, and today me and my co-host Ian are going to go over our picks for the Eastern Conference All-Star teams. So I actually thought that the fan voting for the All-Star teams was going to happen after the Christmas Day games as it has in the past, but the NBA just recently opened up the All-Star voting, so you can go to NBA.com and sign in and vote right now if you want to. I have for the past couple of days with the picks that we're about to talk about in this video. So we are still over a month away from the games actually occurring, so things are subject to change a little bit, but as of right now, these are the players that we think deserve those 12 spots in the Eastern Conference team this season. Of course, we're going to do our Western Conference picks next week, so stay tuned for that. And if you like these sort of like long form, really deep dive videos into like NBA topics, make sure to like and subscribe for more, and we plan to keep doing them.
Let's do it. Who are your Eastern Conference starters? I'm also going to say right off the bat with this criteria thing that I have cheated a little bit on positions. I will say that a player that is definitely not one position is for the sake of all-stars. So you can all drag me for that.
We'll see how lenient the NBA is with that criteria this year, because they've had years in the past where they've been pretty stringent about it. But they opened it up where it's now just backcourt and frontcourt players, right? There's no center nonsense anymore, so you don't really have to worry about there's three awesome power forwards in a conference but no awesome center. That's a thing of the past, which I think is a good decision.
But we're still stuck because I think the four best players in the Eastern Conference are all front-court players.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'll tell you how I dealt with it. I'll name my five starters, and we can see if you have the same five guys, or maybe four out of the five and an additional forward. Then we'll go from there. Okay, so for my starters in the Eastern Conference, I have Donovan Mitchell and Tyrese Haliburton in the backcourt. And then in the front court, I have Jayson Tatum, Kevin Durant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, no surprises there. So, and to be clear, if I did include two guards, or if someone's gonna tie me down and force me to list a guard, I think that Tyrese Haliburton also is my pick. I think if Indiana continues to fade, I do think that the other guard who sneakily has a really strong case is Jrue Holiday. But it's hard, that's not someone who's going to get voted in, that's for sure. Wait, say your front court guys again. I need to figure out which front court guy that I added that you do not have. Your three front court picks are?
Yeah, I have Tatum, Durant, and Antetokounmpo.
Okay, so no Joel Embiid. So basically I have Joel Embiid there instead of Tyrese Haliburton, and that's the only difference. Okay. I just think that those five guys, digging into their statistical impacts and watching them play, those are the five guys that are just playing MVP level basketball. Now you could argue Embiid is he's missed a few more games, right? Embiid's played 21 games, which is that's getting kind of close to the disqualifier. So I don't mind seeing Haliburton there at all. And obviously it fits within how you have to have two guards on the team. And what am I here arguing that Jayson Tatum is a guard? He's been playing power forward all season. I'm kind of a guard though. He dribbles the basketball.
I would say out of the four, Kevin Durant probably has the strongest case for their guard. He did play shooting guard briefly as a rookie. That hasn't been the case since then, but he is a perimeter player that handles the ball a lot.
The other players that came, so we have it's Haliburton versus Embiid for this spot, and again, you can discount that my vote doesn't make any sense, but that's
and if I'm picking who the more talented basketball player is, it's definitely Embiid. Haliburton's just in there to fulfill the requirements of having the two guards in the backcourt.
Yeah, and I think there's these five incredible players in the East this year, and then there's a bit of a drop off to the next tier of the guys that we're all about to talk about. That Haliburton is definitely in and near the top of, and I think he's also just the logical pick with sort of his health and the early the unexpected hype of Indiana. I think narratively this is a very big breakout season for Haliburton, and that always feels exciting to celebrate that with an all-star pick. I mean, he's making the team regardless. Let's get into the Eastern Conference bench players. I don't know, would you rank who else is a lock for you who's not a starter? I'm assuming.
Let's go over our reserves first.
Yeah, but I mean that's starting with the lock reserves. You know what I mean?
Yes,
because they're because I think we'll have some. I'll get into a little bit like a group of players that I've got 15 players for 12 spots.
Yeah. No, it's hard to narrow them down at the end, especially like I think with the wild card spots was probably the biggest thing for me, especially. But I'll say for my second platoon, right? So these are the 2 guards and 3 forwards off the bench. I had Trey Young, Pascal Siakam, Jaylen Brown, Joel Embiid, and probably the controversial one, I had James Harden.
Yeah, James Harden. I mean, everything I just said about Chris Paul applies doubly to James Harden. I was surprised by how, as I was comparing these players head to head, just like, well, I can't argue this guy's better than James Harden. I can't argue this guy's better than James Harden. James Harden has played 15 games. So he's going to need to stay very healthy to qualify for it. But then, sometimes the coaches don't care if he's healthy right now. They're gonna vote him in. Yeah. But for me to feel good about it, I'd like to see him, sort of play healthy for the rest of the time before the All-Stars are named. So you said you have Pascal Siakam, you have Joel Embiid.
Yep.
Who's your third front court guy?
Jaylen
Brown. And then your 2 guards are Harden and
Trey Young.
All right, we've got some different picks here.
I figured we would. And so Harden and Trey Young are difficult, right? Because, well, with Harden, I think injury has been the biggest thing. He's missed half of the season so far, and he's been pretty horrifically bad defensively when he's been on the floor. And it's a similar story with Trey Young. But both of them are still offensively dynamic, even in their like reduced state where Trey Young hasn't been shooting very well this year. And the offense has never looked more stagnant in Atlanta. But it remains the case that the team is still just significantly better with Trey Young on the floor. And the production is there, even though the efficiency isn't. So that's why he gets the nod over players who I stylistically enjoy more. There are no doubt other guards in the Eastern Conference that like I personally prefer their style of play. I think it would be more effective to like build a championship team around. But ultimately, like for me, an all-star pick is a performance award based on the current season. And for that reason, I think James Harden and Trey Young just make a bigger impact, argue with their style of play or the team's, decision to like allow them to run the offense in the way that they do all you want. But I do think they are more impactful when they're on the floor, just due to like how dynamic they are creating plays for themselves and others.
So I don't have either.
Yeah.
Neither of them. Well, one of them I'm going to talk about a little bit more because I've got some at the end of each of these conferences. I still have some decision making to do. But but at least these next 5 players are locked. My 2 guards are Tyrese Halliburton and Jrue Holiday. I think Jrue Holiday has had a massive impact season. In terms of his like on off, he's in like the 94th percentile of the league. I always used dunks and threes estimated plus minus as kind of my favorite little catch-all statistic that considers the most things, and actually seems to have a defensive catch-all stat that isn't completely busted and makes no sense. So
yeah, well, I mean, none of them make sense without the right context, but
yeah. Defensive stats are, I don't want to say garbage, but they're difficult to use, and you need to understand what they are. But the one that is the least wonky, I find, is defensive estimated plus minus from dunks and threes. Their EPM stats really good. Even like after I sort of made the list of players I liked, I went in and sort of like to sort of get an idea of how they were statistically stacking up. I used dunks and threes, and it kind of lined up with what I was seeing. So that's why I like it, because it says that I'm right. Confirmation bias site. So I had Halliburton and Holiday in the backcourt. I just think the defense there needs to be considered. Milwaukee has been a lot better than these other teams we're discussing, despite Chris Middleton being out a ton. Obviously there's a lot of good defensive players in Milwaukee, but Jrue Holiday is a huge part of that. He's widely accepted by a lot of fans as like arguably the best defensive guard in the NBA. And he's having a very strong offensive season as well. He's doing he's doing his job out there. And when I think of some of the drawbacks that Harden and Trey bring to the floor, I just felt kind of comfortable boosting above him. If Harden had played 25 games, maybe it would be a little bit more difficult for me, but I thought that Holiday deserved it. Now I also have Jaylen Brown and Pascal Siakam. I think that they're locks, sort of for very different reasons. Brown is having a great season on like a historically dominant offense, and he's one of the big drivers of that. And then Pascal Siakam, even though the Raptors are struggling, Pascal Siakam has just had the best all around season in the NBA. Like he looks like a superstar out there. His defense has been the best it's been in years. We've talked about him a little bit, at least before he got injured, but he came back and didn't really skip a beat. He's just piling up. He's piling up points, rebounds, assists. He's unstoppable in the middle of the floor. He's really driving a lot of the minimal offensive success Toronto has. And in past years, kind of like from a statistic standpoint, there's a lot of like division on Siakam. Like sometimes he looked better, but some stats sort of didn't like him. And this season, like it's sort of just unanimous across the board. He looks great. The eye test says he's great. The numbers say he's great. And I think he's a all-star lock. Oh, my last guy is Jimmy Butler.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. My other front court player, who maybe I have to move to guard to make things work if I have to put Tyrese Halliburton in the starting lineup and bump Joel Embiid down or Durant down.
I think that'll work. Did you settle on your wild cards yet for the Eastern Conference, or is that still in flux?
So I've got three guys for 2 spots. Okay. So I'll be interested to see who your guys are, or if you can talk me out of anyone. I will say the two last cuts I have that aren't in this consideration are Brook Lopez, just the defensive player of the year thus far, and also just finally kind of actually shooting the ball well and playing elite defense at the same time. Like he's just kind of, in a lot of ways, he's having his best season ever, like in terms of just sort of putting it all together. And Kristaps Porzingis is another late cut. When I was just sort of looking into it, I like Washington has fallen off, but Kristaps Porzingis has been anchoring their defense and has been their best offensive player as well, especially with Bradley Beal missing so much time. When I was kind of digging around and both watching footage and reading their stats, it's like, I mentioned Kyle Kuzma I mentioned him earlier, but Porzingis deserves some serious consideration for what he's doing down in Washington. So that brings me to the last three guys for these last 2 spots are Trey Young,
okay,
Darius Garland,
okay,
and OG Anunoby.
Yeah, I really like the OG pick there. Or I guess he's kind of teetering on the edge, right? Whether he's actually going to be on the team.
Yeah.
And he has been struggling with injury lately. So
yeah, came back last night. The Raptors have completely fallen apart as a defense in the 4 games he missed. Their defensive rating was in the 120s. Came back, they immediately hold Philly to a 101 offensive rating. And going down the stretch, he was guarding Joel Embiid. And in crunch time, he contested Embiid's shot to force a miss twice. And then they decided to change to a James Harden pick and roll. OG switched onto James Harden and just absolutely suffocated him. And I've never seen like someone lock down 2 kinds of players like so successfully in such a short period of time. And the Raptors were about to they did go on to lose that game in overtime, but the Raptors looked down and out. They needed like stops, and OG Anunoby heroically pulled out 3 of them. He's also obviously he's, in my mind, he would make this team on the back of his defense, but he's also low-key having a pretty strong offensive season. He's averaging 18 points per game. He's shooting the ball well enough. He's not a playmaker by any stretch of the imagination, but he's also scoring a ton in transition. And he's a very dependable shooter. It's up and down, but at this point he's a solid shooter, and he also can play a little bully ball against some matchups. So it's not like he's just a defensive specialist that's getting here on defense. He's he's in my top 3 for defensive player of the year, and he's averaging an efficient 18 points, 19 points per game.
Yeah, I mean it's hard not to consider like the overall two-way impact, especially because like a lot of these guys, especially the guards in the Eastern Conference, the defensive side of the ball is not typically their strong suit, with the
Yeah.
exception of Drew Holiday, who is one of my last two picks. I saved my wild card picks for guys that I personally like really like.
Yeah.
Um,
As we are allowed
and
to. It's our lists. Leave us alone.
yeah, exactly. And like they may not have like the obvious all-star numbers, but I do think they have all-star impact and probably greater impact than guys who are necessarily like scoring more than them or handling the ball more than them. So
Yeah.
Drew Holiday is one. For some reason, I thought he was having the best offensive season of his career, but that was actually last year. And he's been solid this year, but it's been a slight drop off, which makes sense because I think the overall team has struggled a bit offensively due to Chris Middleton missing so much time and then really taking time to get back up to speed as he's returned.
Yeah.
So he was one, and the other one, I did not have Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was a strong consideration for this spot, but I actually have his
Oh.
teammate Bam Adebayo.
I didn't even see Bam's not on my list at all. I mean, he's on my list. But he didn't even make that kind of last number of cuts. I'm down to have a quick Bam discussion because one thing
Yeah.
that Bam has been really disappointing for me. Obviously, he's still one of the better defensive players in the NBA, and is like maybe not getting enough credit for that this year. As Miami's kind of gone from elite to just sort of like borderline top 10. He's asked to cover so many holes
Yeah.
on defense. Like, they're like, yeah, we're gonna play like a bunch of 30-year-olds and Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, and guess what? You're not gonna get another, like, everyone is gonna be under 6'7" except for you. And you're just gonna have to do everything. You're gonna have to like switch out on the perimeter and shut down point guards and be our backline rim protector. Like they are running him ragged defensively, asking him to do everything. I do think that offensively, I'm a little disappointed in Bam this season. I know he's putting up like the scoring and rebounding numbers look good, and they're definitely sort of all-star numbers, but like he's completely stopped being any kind of a passer. Like I remember like 2 years ago he was this playmaking hub for them, getting the ball in the high post, and that's just completely dried up. Like he's turning the ball over more than he ever has before, and posting his lowest assist rate in years. He's basically neutral as a playmaker this season, which was where I always thought he was getting a lot of his offensive value from. And then as a shooter, he's really stagnated as well. Like it looked for a while like he was going to start at least he extended out to like long two a couple years ago and tried a couple threes, like, and it looked like, oh, eventually you're going to be able to at least pick and pop a little bit. But
Yeah.
but since then, that's just sort of like, dried up more and more every year. So he's this sort of like unimpressive, just, like finisher and around the rim scorer, and the playmaking is gone. And, he's averaging 20 points per game, but it doesn't, it feels off. It's also at least just efficient overall year in a long time.
Yeah, I think for me, the big thing has been Bam has missed out. Bam has been one of the best defensive players in the league for years now.
Yeah.
And he's missed out on some of those accolades by virtue of injury. And this is the first year, really, since like, very early on in his career, his rookie and second year, where he's been overall healthy, at least so far.
Yeah.
And I think out of the two, it was really Jimmy Butler or Bam. I think were the two I was considering most strongly for this spot. And by the on-off numbers, Bam is a greater impact on the team's success. I mean, and part of that is due to like how like Omer Yurtseven plays when he gets in the game, right? It's not all due to Bam himself. But I do think we're at the point of Jimmy Butler's career now where he's firmly like a postseason player, and he'll be pretty good in the regular season, but he's going to miss about a third of the games. He's not a two-way menace in the regular season.
Yeah.
And I mean, he still gets the line, he still puts up point production, but like we're not getting peak Jimmy Butler. Whereas we are getting, I hesitate to say peak Bam Adebayo because he has had some monster games in the playoffs, but like we are seeing Bam's best night in and night out. So I think that the injuries and like kind of the on-off difference between the two made me lean a little bit more Bam Adebayo in what was like a pretty close race.
Yeah, and I mean, I think especially if you want to really lean on the defensive side of that argument, I think that it's absolutely silly to say that Bam doesn't deserve a spot on the All-Star team. On regardless of what I just said about his offense, like his defense alone, I can't prop up OG Anunoby and ignore what Bam is doing. So I think that's a good pick. I think I like, in terms of, again, like expanding deeper into the sort of like the numbers, I know that like the like regular on off gives a nod to Bam a little bit for the exact reason you described, but when with estimated plus minus, Jimmy Butler's like still a top 10 player in the NBA, and Bam is like not having that impressive of a season. Like Bam is somehow, Butler's taking, despite not really taking threes anymore, he's averaging less shots than Bam and more points. He's the be all end all of their offense when he's out there, because Kyle Lowry just kind of decides most of the time that he doesn't want to shoot. And I also, like you said earlier, you were kind of built like projecting out with some of these picks, and I think that Jimmy Butler is likely, like maybe he only plays 50 games this season. That's been sort of par for the course, but right now he's played 8 less games than Bam. If he went down with another injury tomorrow or missed another 3 games, I think that I'd start kind of disqualifying him. But at this point in the season, he's played 20. He's comfortably there enough for me, and I just think that he's like, he's just such a better player than Bam offensively. While as much as you say that he's not a two-way menace, and I agree, I think that they've been because of the way they built out the roster, they've been forced to make Jimmy Butler play a lot more defense than they have in the past 3 seasons, because there's no PJ Tucker anymore. Like Caleb Martin is their like other forward. Like they're just really small. Jimmy Butler has to, like, he's got to help out, like protecting the rim sometimes. Like he's got to do his work on the back line as like just like as a sneaky, crafty player. He's got to guard the guys that are too big for Caleb Martin. They're asking him to do a lot more, and that's probably why he's likely to break down, and they're gonna have to shut him down if they want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. But up at this season mark, I go Butler over Bam, but I think that's I think your argument is fine and strong for that. Little lost in the weeds now. Who's your other wild card?
Oh, that was Drew Holiday.
Okay, you got Drew in there. So your list is done. So I've got to decide between we've already talked about OG. I've got to decide between OG, Garland, and Trey. You already have Trey Young in there. I'll go on a little anti-Trey run. I'm ready for it. I've been a Trey Young fan. I've been putting him on the All-Star team for years. I just think that this year he's not doing the Trey Young things that we assume he's doing them because he's putting up 27 points per game and 10 assists. Those are just like obscene numbers. But we also all know that his shooting struggles this year, they haven't gone away. He had one huge game recently, but aside that, like he's shooting under 30% from 3 despite taking 7 attempts per game. This guy takes up a monster part of the offense. Like he's the whole offensive system there, and he is not delivering. The playmaking's there. The playmaking has always been good, though I do think it's been a bit stagnant this year and has looked I've been a little bit less impressed by Trey as a passer than I have in years past, despite the assist numbers. I kind of blame Nate McMillan for the sort of like really awkward having Dejounte Murray and Trey Young basically just take turns and get out of the way. It kind of looks like Russell Westbrook and James Harden in Houston those years ago or something. Like it's like, can the other one not participate? I don't really understand.
I think some clear evidence of that is like how John Collins, who's their most like dynamic attacker of the rim off ball, is just been relegated to like go stand in the corner mode.
Yeah.
So
yes. They just don't let John Collins play basketball. Like I feel bad for John Collins. They reduce his role every year. This guy was putting up 20 and 10 and has only improved in a lot of ways since then as like a shooter and as a sort of like hustle player on defense. He obviously has some defensive limitations, but he tries really hard and they do not let him play. Just get out of the way, John Collins seems to be the game plan every night in Atlanta. But yeah, we're just talking about a player that has to make the All-Star game entirely on the back of their offense, because we know that they are arguably the worst we keep saying arguably, like I think we're being generous when we say he's arguably the worst high minute defensive player in the NBA. Like who else is in competition for that? Like Trey Young is a piece of tissue paper. He absolutely has no ability to like physically affect the game on defense. Everyone sort of knows that. So unlike, it's just hard to get a total zero on one side of the ball, and then you're making all your impact on offense, and you're having your worst offensive season ever, like since your rookie year at least. And even then, it's sort of like he was a little bit more efficient in his rookie season. So it's just like I don't really know how to evaluate Trey Young, and I kind of why I'm sort of wanting to side with some players who are just kind of playing normal two-way basketball. Darius Garland might not be piling up the numbers quite as much as him, but he's like not a total zero on defense. He's okay. And gives you a lot of what Trey Young does on offense. Maybe not at the same volume because he's sharing the backcourt with Donovan Mitchell. But I do kind of like I'm feeling Darius Garland over Trey right now. Even though Darius Garland has had some difficulties of his own.
Okay, so we went over our all-star starters and our reserves. So really quick for these before we move on to the West, we're going to go over our guys that were like, we really considered like the last cuts, right? And I had about 6 of these guys in the East, and Ian had 42 of them. So let's go over those guys that were for you that like
only toughest. 39. What is this slander? Only 39.
Oh, yeah. So Trey Young obviously was one, right? Because he kind of came down to the wire. But did you have anyone else?
Yeah. So I mean, we'll Trey and Anunoby not making the team at the last second. Porzingis, Lopez, and Bam Adebayo as these big men that didn't quite make the cut. Some sort of surprise considerations. I mentioned Jared Allen. Julius Randle has low key been the best Nick, and his play has really picked up lately, and I think he deserves a mention.
He's had a big bounce back season this year.
Yeah. On the same token of really unpopular players who play in New York, Kyrie Irving has sneakily got up to 22 games now and is playing Kyrie Irving basketball. I'm going to cut it off there. I did not consider DeMar DeRozan. I'm call me a hater. James Harden was the another guard that I considered didn't get there. Jalen Brunson I looked at, Fred VanVleet I looked at, Clint Capella I looked at, and Dejounte Murray.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I looked at a lot of those guys as well. The only guy I'll mention, first of all, I will mention DeMar DeRozan. Like, I know the defense is bad. I know he can't shoot. I know that the advanced numbers don't necessarily love DeMar. But Zach LaVine's been really bad this year.
Yep.
Coming off of, what was it, a foot surgery? He had some kind of foot thing this summer. And then I think Vucevic has just been wildly disappointing ever since he's been in Chicago. Patrick Williams hasn't developed as much as Bulls fans had hoped, and Lonzo Ball continues to be out and is just now progressing towards running. That's the latest report. So Lonzo Ball cannot currently run, but he's getting there. I mean, that's kind of a promising update, considering like we had heard that he was struggling to walk upstairs a couple weeks ago. So
yeah,
being able to run is, I think, quite a leap. Pardon the pun. Forward from that. But the one other guy I will mention, and he has missed a lot of games, and he is a horrible defender, and the on-off numbers don't love him, but it's Bradley Beal, who I still want to say he's the best player in Washington, and I know like Kuzma's having a better two-way season, and as far as like trade targets go, teams are probably looking to Washington more to try to trade for Kyle Kuzma, more so than Bradley Beal.
Contract-wise, yeah, definitely.
Contract-wise, and I think just like team fit-wise, you can only
lost 9 in a row.
Yeah.
Damn.
But you can only really have one small guard on a team, right? Where you can load yourself up with as many big two-way wings as you want. But I still wanted to give Brad Beal some consideration. He's still a very effective offensive player when he's on the floor.
Yeah, he's kind of toned it down in terms of shooting the ball this year, and like his defense isn't as bad. I think Brad Beal's been solid. He's just like, he's played 19 games, and with Porzingis and Kuzma playing at sort of similar levels, and just like Porzingis being the defender there, I just thought he was the wizard that I was most interested in when reviewing them.
Well, my big thing this year is like I just don't really care about injuries anymore, especially after like, you know, probably most of the people listening to this listen to other NBA podcasts as well, but there's so much consternation last year around all-star picks when it came to games played. And it
Yeah.
got really annoying as a listener, Every
Yeah.
single list people are making, they have to mention injuries, especially like a lot of stars missed a ton of games early in the season last year due to
Yeah.
injury or rest or whatever. So I just got to the point where like I don't care. If a guy's played half the season and I feel like he's clearly a better player than another guy, I'm gonna put him on my all-star team. Like it's fine.
I agree with you, and also felt that in a lot of those podcasts, you'd see them punish one player for it and not another. Like, one person making the picks would be like, well, I can't put him because he's missed blah 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 games, and then just not mention it for another guy who's missed the exact same amount of games. Sometimes the other host catches it and calls them out, and
Yeah.
then they're just like, oh, guess you're right, sort of thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I put some like stars on some guys that have missed like a lot of games, but still give them
Yeah.
consideration. And Bradley Beal is one of those. And you put James Harden on the team with 15 games played, so I think we've established a pretty low basement for that.
Well, it's a tiebreaker, right? Like, so
Yeah,
if in my opinion, James Harden and Bradley Beal were identical levels of players, well, maybe Bradley Beal's not a good example because he hasn't played a lot, but if James
yeah,
Harden and Jalen Brunson, in my opinion, were the exact same level of player, and Jalen Brunson's played every game, and James Harden has missed half the games, I would go with
yeah.
Jalen Brunson. But
I totally get it.
um,
Yeah, it makes sense. I feel the same.
yeah, yeah. I also considered Jalen Brunson. I really wanted him to put him on an All Star team, just like he's been so awesome to watch this year.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it is
I just
fun.
I really enjoy Jalen Brunson's game, and I didn't think I did as much on the Mavs when he was playing more of like
Yeah,
a
I feel you were a little bit of a hater early on in it, but
yeah.
I've been up and down with him as well. Like I liked him when he was plucky, and then felt he got a little overrated in the playoffs. But to me, he's thick Tony Parker without some
Mm,
without some of the glaring problems that Parker had. He's a little bit better as a shooter and a little bit stronger as a defender. Not that he's great at either of those things, but just this
as
guy that
far
can
as
really get into the paint and can kill you.
as as far as we know, he hasn't slept with any of his teammates' wives. So
That's
that's
true.
not
Yeah, yeah. As far as we know,
yeah.
that's huge.
Me and Ian don't just talk about NBA All Star teams, we talk about a lot of other NBA topics as well, one of which you can find right here in this video. So give this one a shot. And thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.